Folk who did something in Vegas that did not stay in Vegas. What happened? Was in the Venetian playing roulette with my wife. In walks this crowd of drunk early 20s frat guys. I quickly picked up that it was one of said guy's 23rd birthday, and he was down to his last $100. He puts it on black. It hits. Now he's got $200, and he wants to walk away, but his friends are begging him on, so he lets it ride. Hits again. Now he has $400. The table is growing loud as he lets it ride again. $800. At this point, stuff is getting exciting. He puts the $800 on red, and it hits again. $1,600. Now it's getting really loud, and the other frat guys are all like, "Just let it ride, dude." This guy puts the $1,600 on 23. I think that was higher than the table max because the pit boss came over to approve it, and obviously approved it. I covered my face with my hands. I knew what it would feel like to lose a free $1,600 as a 23-year-old and was picturing the devastation. The wheel spins and 23. It was a $56,000 payout, if I remember correctly. Let me tell you, that table was friggin' pandemonium. They did leave after that, and I presume had a fun night. Story 2. Bachelorette party a week before the wedding. I and a couple other friends said it was a bad idea. We knew the bride and knew nothing good could come from a Vegas trip, but she really wanted it. Red flag right there. Sure, enough a video was sent to her fiancé of her making out with some random couple at the club we were in. And apparently, that's not all that happened. She said that couple recorded their threesome. Sucks, too, because her fiancé was a really sweet guy. She wasn't even drunk either. Not that it would make it better, honestly. But she made all these decisions sober. Told us to duck off when we tried to get her away from the couple. Story 3. Buddy of mine, I wasn't there, had his bachelor party in Vegas and have sex with an escort. Then he ducked another the next night. One of the guys who went on the trip with him was his fiancé brother. So when they get back home, the brother says, "I hope you had fun, but I have to tell my sister what you did." It was a whole thing, but the dude ended up not saying anything, so the brother told his sister, the fiancé, what happened. She married him anyway, and he ended up repeatedly cheating on her. Eventually, they got divorced. Story 4. Not from misbehaving, but happened to me when I was there. I guess NSFW. Went there with a group of people for a men's league, beer league level, hockey tournament, sharing a room with our team captain. I spent the evening with another friend bouncing around a few places on the strip, but nothing too wild because we had a game in the morning. Team captain was still awake when I got to the room. Spoke briefly about our days. We both go to sleep. He never woke up. Natural cause so far as I know, as he wasn't into any substances. But it ducked me up, knowing a friend just died right beside me and I was the last person he spoke to. Really made me hope I didn't miss any signs of distress. Felt awful for a long time after. Still do in a way. Story 5. Had sex with a woman I just met that night in a hot tub at the hotel. I gave her my phone number. It turns out she had just got married 2 weeks before, and her husband was now deployed in Afghanistan. She called me drunk and crying every night for weeks. Story 6. The bride and her maid of honor and bridesmaids, 3, all went for a 4 days girls trip to Vegas. Well, one of the 3 bridesmaids let it slip that the bride, maid of honor, and one of the bridesmaids all had sex with guys they met there. The wedding was called off and the maid of honor's marriage ended. Story 7. Kid from my high school class basically ruined his law school career because he hit an exotic bird in Vegas. Story 8. Pre-pandemic times, when professional conferences and conventions were a lot more popular, we'd have an industry conference annually in Vegas. The amount of people that lost their jobs, destroyed their marriages, or tanked their company's year was staggering. Like, you'd think it was a once-in-a-blue-moon occurrence. But it was a guarantee each year that some high-drama antics would go down at least a few times. I'm out of that rat race now, but I've since heard they've moved the annual conference to Reno, and it's very much the same. Story 9. Got dumped by a girl I thought was the one. In my despair, I hopped in the car and drove to Vegas. No plan, no room, very little money. On the first night there, I met a girl in the same boat, and she looked like Sarah Michelle Gellar. We spent 4 days wandering about and doing decadent and debaucherous things. Before we parted ways, we got matching tattoos. Nothing significant, just a silly little symbol. This was before social media. And she scribbled her name and number on a piece of paper, and I lost it. That was 26 years ago. I don't even remember her name, but we had a hell of a time, and I still have a silly little tattoo. Story 10. Boys trip 10 years ago to Vegas. Got a 3 a.m. ass tattoo, roughly half the size of one cheek. Didn't really remember it until the next day, and I rolled over and I was like, oh, my ass hurts. Anyway, I've had to see it every day for the last 10 years, and will do for the rest of my life. No real regrets. Makes me laugh. Story 11. Went out to Vegas for a Super Bowl party back in 2015. Was there for 4 days. Don't recommend staying that long. On day 2, our group was hanging, jumping from casino to casino. I parked at a $1 slot machine and played for almost 3 hours while a very sweet cocktail waitress fed me gin and tonics. By 2:45 a.m., the rest of my crew had called it a night, so I was alone. Finished my 12th drink, only know this because we ran into the same waitress on day 3, and she told me how many she gave me, and started walking back to Paris where I was staying. Right as I got to the elevator, my stomach rumbled, and my brain shouted, "We need food!" So I stumbled down the hall to a little pizza by the slice stall. As my slices and I were heading back to the elevator, a very attractive red-headed woman was walking the other way. I used to be a massive flirt in all conditions, so I hit the brakes and asked, "Which way you going?" She laughed and said, "Same way you are," and started walking with me. We got up to my room, she took off her jacket and sat on the end of the bed. We talked for maybe 3 minutes before I realized she was working. I apologized, explained I thought she was a tourist like me. She was very modestly dressed. Nothing about her gave lady of the night to me in my drunk brain, and told her I wasn't interested in paying for a fun night. She clicked her tongue and said, "Too bad. You're on the cuter side than most of my customers and I think we'd have a good time." I asked if I owed her anything for her time. She said, "No, honey, it was nice just getting to chat for a bit, though." Then drunk brain jumped up and said, "You want some pizza?" She laughed and extended her hand out for a slice. We ate pizza and talked for about 10 minutes before she left. Not a wild Vegas story, but I still laugh about it from time to time all these years later. Story 12. My friend's fiancé went to a bachelor party. After he came back, she deleted all of his pictures on Instagram and broke up with him. He had videos on his phone with a $1,500 escort. She asked why he even recorded it, and he said because it was $1,500. Story 13. Years ago, and not long out of law school, was in court for a case against opposing counsel who I had gone to law school with, and her paralegal. I had met the paralegal once, just in passing. I lost, and I exchanged pleasantries with both women, and I headed to the airport for a family member's Vegas wedding. That night, we finished the rehearsal dinner at the Venetian, and I go walking around just people watching, little gambling, drinking. Headed back to my room at the Bellagio, and I hear my name sort of screeched. I spin, and it's opposing counsel's paralegal, and she's sprinting at me, throws her arms around me, and long story short, she too was in Vegas for her sister's wedding, and left court for the airport. We chat no biggie. I head up to my room as her and her bridesmaid friends are going out. 3 a.m. there's a knock. I open, and it's her. She walks in, kicks off her heels, and just crawls into my bed and curls up and is out. I cover her up and take the other bed. At 7 a.m. or so, I wake up to the sound of my shower. There's a black dress, thigh highs, underwear in a pile on my floor. I picked them up and folded them and laid back down. She comes out in a towel a few minutes later and sits on the bed. I ask her if she remembers how she got there, and she said yes. She had gone out and they got drunk as duck, and she doesn't drink nearly at all. She was beyond incoherent. They got to some bar, the girls took off without her, and one had her phone because she was checking something. She had no idea where she was, couldn't even remember her hotel as she was rooming with her cousin who booked it, but remembered seeing me at Bellagio. She took off walking and followed the fountains and ended up there, talked the front desk lady into giving her my room number, and there she was. She thanked me for letting her crash and not asking questions. Then she asked for a favor, if she could borrow a shirt, shorts, and pool shoes, and if she could bum a Uber back to her hotel. So I got her downstairs, some coffee, and in her car. I get home several days later and back to work. On my desk in a FedEx box with my shirt, shorts, shoes, a $50, and a "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas" cheesy shirt, with a note that said she appreciated everything along with info on reservations at a restaurant and her number. And that dinner was my ex-wife and I's first date. Story 14. I used to go to Vegas every year for a trade show. The first year I went, I was 18. You can't book a hotel unless you are 21 there. Found a website that let me book a room at a hotel off the strip that just said 18 plus to book. So I booked a room online. I fly down. First time flying, first time going really anywhere on my own. Didn't really know anyone, and it was just me for my business I started. Still laugh, my mom was just like, "Have fun." Show up to this rundown hotel. Front desk has bars and bulletproof glass. Guy asks for my ID. "Oh, you're only 18? We can't book rooms for anyone under 21. Then he looks over and saw I paid in full for a week. Another mistake. Never go more than like 3 days tops. And he says, "Oh, you're all paid up. Here's the key." The room had bullet holes in the wall and what appeared to be stains on the carpet. Absolute worst hotel I have ever stayed in. Had to stay for the full week. Slept on top of the blankets in my clothes each night. Luckily, nothing too terrible happened, but what an experience for an 18-year-old on their own for the first time, haha. Fortunately, stayed in better hotels the other 9 years I went. Came home with about 1,000 of those escort cards they hand out on the strip for my friends. I will never forget the guy waving the cards yelling, "Chicks with junks!" Story 15. Not my story, we were doing a bachelor weekend. Duh. One of our friends was walking through casino and some random cougar grabbed him and kissed him. This could be interesting. She took him back to her room and they got right down to it. He was going at it, and all of a sudden he looks up and sees a dude sitting in a chair in the shadows. So my boy stops and says, "What the heck?" She says, "Don't worry, he loves this." So he goes back to work. Pretty sure I'd have noped out. She tells him to stick it inside and yell, "I love Duck Orange County Escort." We all called bullcrap, but we ran into her the next morning with her husband at breakfast, and they had a whole conversation about what had transpired the night before. It was a wild conversation. Story 16. My buddy got banned from the Sphere. Because it is owned by MSG, he is banned from all their properties, including Madison Square Garden, Radio City, and the Chicago Theater. So that crap ain't staying in Vegas. Story 17. 2010, boys trip, 5 of us. Second night there, got pretty drunk, enough to not realize I left my wallet in the cab on the way to a club. Tried sneaking into a spot that had a first floor bar and a wild nightclub on the second floor. Didn't work. Couldn't get past the bouncer checking wristbands. I stayed downstairs while one of my friends would go back and forth checking in on me, buying me a drink or two in the process. About 3 in the morning, the most beautiful girl I've ever seen walks by with a group of her friends and sits at a table next to us while she's the only one sort of dancing back and forth lazily. I ask her to dance. We talk for about 20 minutes, and after getting her number, we go out separate ways. She ended up living in LA while I was from Northern Cali. Long story short, we did the long-distance thing for about 2 years, before I decided to move down to LA. We've been married for almost 11 years now. 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a lot of beautiful memories to look back on. So my wallet stayed in Vegas, but I ended up taking home a whole-ass family. Story 18. Going back 25 plus years, at a conference with a coworker and shared a cab ride with a coworker back to our hotel. He called his wife saying he was heading back to hotel. He asked me to say hi to his wife, which I thought was a little weird because I'd met his wife once for 2 minutes at a previous work function, like 2 years prior. We get to the hotel and he suddenly realized he left something at the event hall and asked the cab driver to get another ride after we'd paid. Apparently, he got back in and asked the driver to take him to some brothel, except he was yammering with the driver about the place, not knowing he'd butt-dialed his wife. He's still paying alimony last I heard. 2023. Story 19. My then fiance and I did a joint bachelorette thing in Vegas with all of our groomsmen and bridesmaids. The plan was that the 2 parties were going to party separately for a few days. Then we were all going to meet up on Saturday night. We planned to get everyone together for a nice dinner to thank them for making the trip out there, but ended up taking them to an Elvis chapel where our parents and siblings were waiting for us. The bridesmaids all started crying, and my best man was out of sorts because he had taken a strong edible with one of my other groomsmen. In preparation for this dinner, we promised everyone. It was the wedding we wanted, and we were thrilled no one guessed what we had planned. Anyway, still happily married 1 year later, would recommend a Vegas wedding with Elvis? Story 20. Did substances for the first time there, was nervous. So I drank a ton and did way too much. I turned into a zombie where I was blacked out, but conscious cause of the coke, so it was like a movie. I watched what happened but didn't have control. Anyway, me and friends kept getting kicked out of clubs cause of the substances. Ended up going to a strip club, and I got talked into going to the back room and spent a few $1,000s there. They make you buy a bottle. Just for some private lap dances from 2 hot girls. The girls kept trying to get more money out of me. But thankfully my CC companies were like, something's fishy, so they locked my cards. Definitely wasn't worth it. Also, that was the first night, so I had no access to money anymore for rest of the weekend. Story 21. 2 months before my Vegas trip, I told my wife that I had a drinking problem and was going to try and stop. I was a successful, functional drunk who got invited to an all-expenses-paid business trip to Vegas to speak with the CEO on the main stage at a large conference. I stayed 100% sober while I was there and found a great cigar lounge, Casa Fuente, to help pass the time. They had a full bar, but I stuck with seltzer water 3 limes. On my last day, I went back to the lounge to buy a cigar to take home and asked if they had any tubes or cases to protect the cigar from getting crushed. They gave me one of the beautiful wooden cigar boxes that their specialty cigars come in, and I still have that in my office, holding all of my cigar tools and lighters. Story 22. Oh man. Went out there with some friends from the II Riverside. We stayed at the Circus. Our last night, a mutual friend made it his mission to procure himself a lady of the night. So with no phone on him at all, he took off onto the men's club at like 3 a.m. Morning came and nobody could get hold of him. On the drive back, my homie got a call from him. Apparently, he found an escort that gave him a $200 Hey Jay, and of course, he didn't have a dime to pay for it. So the girl's pimp took his truck for collateral and he was freaking out. Eventually, he calls his mom to wire him money, but she can't do it until the next day. So he had to stay out there in Vegas for the night. The next morning, he gets the money sent, and he drives back to the Riverside. We were still there at a friend's house, so we told the other guy to come through. When he got there, he explained the whole story. At the end, someone asked him, "So you paid $200 for a BJ, got held against your will, threatened, and missed a day of work you couldn't, so you lost your job. Yeah. Was it worth it, losing all that stuff?" He looked at me like I was from outer space and went, "Wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world." Story 23. We got married in secret for the paperwork. They tried to upcharge us to have Elvis do the wedding, but we said no, extra $100. It turned out he was the only guy working that day, so we got Elvis anyway. Totally worth the extra money, even though we didn't get charged for it. Story 24. My very first time visiting Vegas, I went to a 4-day music festival. It was the time of my life. 58 people died that night, and my best friend got hit through his calf. We got separated, and I had to fly back to my home state without them. It's been 8 years, and I still hear the screams from time to time. Story 25. My now ex-husband cheated on a work trip in Vegas. He and I are in the same industry. When he came home from the trip, I knew something happened even though he denied it. Fast forward 2 years later, we're going through our divorce, and I'm at a party that is a mix of friends and industry people. A guy I didn't know was telling a story about when he hosted a large group of people in Vegas. He was basically trying to escort shame this woman, who I knew, and then dropped the nice detail that the lucky winner on the trip was my then husband. They ducked the entire trip and didn't hide it. It was good to know I wasn't crazy for suspecting, but it messed with me that so many people knew about it. Story 26. Not right in Vegas, but we spent the last couple nights there, the ducking sand in my backpack. You'd think you would not be trying to wash out 2 decades-old sand from Nevada at this point in time. I may actually have preferred the chlamydia. Story 27. It's kind of a real-life him story 2010 bachelor party. 0.5 dudes, 2 married, 1 was in an LTR, 1 single. On the second night, we hired a few strippers to visit us at the house we rented. Both were 10 and great at keeping the party going. I took a liking to one of them and seemed to reciprocate, but I'm paying and she has to. About 2 hours and one of our guys had disappeared. I went upstairs to find him passed out in bed. As I was leaving the suite, the escort was there. She made a pass, Amy, wanted to take a shower together. I asked how much. She said, put something extra in the tip. So to the shower we went. 10 minutes later, the whole party burst in the bathroom to see us going at it. We call it a night a few hours later. I wake up to a text from her asking how long we are staying. She wants to get together the next day. I'm thinking, boy, am I sucker and how much is this going to cost me? Maybe a kidney. I ditch the guys and go hang out across. She pays for dinner. We go have a few drinks before she goes to work. We text through most of the night. The guys are eating it up. We fly out the next day around noon. She and I go to brunch. There is clear chemistry, but I'm still skeptical. A few months later, I visited Vegas a few times, ended my relationship, and seemed to be dating her. Still don't have 100% confidence, belief in everything but the trips to Vegas were fun. We got into every club, etc. Fast forward 15 years, and we've been married for 12. 2 planned kids together. She moved to my city about a year after we met. Didn't want to dance anymore. Said it was a phase and made the money she needed to make. She got a job until we had kids and became a som. She's never looked back. We dabbled in of, but she really didn't embrace it like she thought she would. So now she lives a normal life, involved in the school, community, runs a small online business. Suffice to say, we don't tell people how we met. We say it was at a Vegas conference, and the guys are sworn to secrecy. I suspect they have told their wives, but it's so far in the past that no one cares. So what happened in Vegas finally left Vegas and became my wife. Story 28. On a large work conference trip, my wife's colleague met with an escort. Back in his hotel room, the escort drugged him with the intent to rob him. He passes. Story 29. My mom got drunk at the Hoover Dam. She couldn't stop making dam jokes. Where is all the dam water? She would ask. Or, where's the damn restroom? My bladder's dam is about to give. Where's that damn guide? Oh, look at that damn bird. Can I speak to a dam employee? Do you have many dam fish? And so on. It is brought up at almost every family dinner. And we all laugh every time. Great memories were had at that dam. Story 30, 2001. I was at a company retreat for a week, and we would work in meetings from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., and they would give us $100 cash as we left to gamble with or whatever. The buffet was lacking at the large, pyramid-shaped hotel, so I went looking for something else and found a seafood restaurant and sat down and ordered a meal. I should have realized when there were no prices on the menu, but the bill was $300. I had thought it might be $60, so I paid with a company credit card. Got a call from the CFO upon my return with a pretty solid-ass chewing. Luckily, I made them a lot of money and got a pass. Also, on my way out of the hotel on the last day, I put the last dollar they gave me in a slot machine and won enough to get my project car painted. Story 31. 15 years ago, my wife and I went to Vegas for a friend's wedding. My wife fell in love with the hotel hairdryer, so much so that she bought one at checkout. The marriage ended 2 years later, but we still have the dryer. Works great. Story 32. I went for my birthday with a few friends, matched with a girl on a dating app. When we met up, I found out she was in Vegas for work, escort. Even weirder, found out she was from my home state, city. We had some fun nights and stayed in contact for a bit. I hope she's doing well. Story 33. Went for a girls' trip. This was a few months after my dad died and thought maybe this would cheer me up. Best friend decides the first night it would be a great night to cheat on her boyfriend of 5 years with another woman. I tried to give her crap, and she essentially told me to duck off. So we then spent the next 3 days listening to her, trying to justify herself, and asking everyone not to judge her, which we did. Story 34. The owner of the club I worked at would take everyone with 1 year's employment on a trip every year. I did get to go to Vegas, but other years my day job precluded me from attending. So anyway, here we are in Vegas, and the bouncers and I decided to walk the street. We'd stop by a casino, get a few drinks, and go on down the street. So we're in the Mirage sitting by a water feature that looked like a jungle. So the head bouncer at the time looks across the table and asked a guy who nobody liked, but we tolerated him if, for $100, he'd jump to the edge, do a Tarzan yell, and jump into the pool. I said, "Put your money on the table." The guy we didn't like was absolutely not going to do it, so I looked at Dan and said, "I'll do it." He should have known not to put that challenge up in front of a lunatic like me. So I called the waitress over and asked for security, and I swear within 30 seconds we had a crowd of them around us. The head guy asked me what was up, and I asked him if I did that would they throw me in jail or just out of the casino. He asked me if I was a guest there, and I said no. He answered, "We'd just escort you out." I was like, "Really?" He laughed and said, "I'd do it for $100. So I grabbed the money, ran to the edge, did a Tarzan yell, jumped in, splashed around, and looked at him and said, "Let's go." Him and the 3 guys that escorted me out were laughing their asses off all the way to the door. I thanked them, waited for my buddies to come out, and down the strip we went. Story 35. Got an epic warped tour experience. I was in the USF at the time doing aircraft maintenance. They shut our runway down for 2 months to tear it up and lay down a new one, so they sent us to March RB Sai. The squadron said you could drive down there if you had a legit reason. I lied and said that I had family around there. So I ended up getting to drive. A friend went with me, and I took all the mountain bikes from our mountain biking group so we could ride there. This was 2001, and Warped Tour was in Vegas while we were in CA. So we went. We went out on Friday and arrived around noon. We went straight to it. Hot-ass summer as we shut down in June and July. We didn't eat anything. We didn't take water or get any water while we were there. We just hopped concert to concert. We got back to the hotel at 1 a.m., went straight to the hotel bar. I started with a Long Island, then we all got a beer, then we all took a shot of tequila. I felt fine until I stood up from the bar stool. Everything went crazy. My legs were rubber, but I stayed on my feet. We got back to the hotel room and decided to do dares. First, run to the closest pool, jump in, and run back. We all got away with that. Next, run to the first pool, run in, find a piece of trash, jump in second pool, run back. We did this in pairs, so the other 2 that went with me went first. I was leaning on the wall to stand by now. After a few minutes, one friend returns panicked. "Oh crap, oh sit, don't answer the door." A few seconds later, bam, 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 security, open up. Security guy says we need to be out by checkout. I got the full story the next day. So they got to the first pool. They went out but couldn't find a piece of trash on the sidewalks. They gave up and ran to the second pool. Only security was waiting. They told them the pool was closed. It said open 24 hours. And they argued that it wasn't. They bolted. One friend was really hardcore into Aikido in his youth and was really agile. He did some ninja crap and got up to the second story without using the stairs, so security couldn't follow him. The other guy was not so nimble, and security followed him to our room. The entire trip was really fun. I learned a lot of various bike skills during that trip, got to see Warped Tour, and I think I still have a sample CD somewhere from it from a band that was just starting out. Story 36. Guy I worked with went to Vegas with his buddies. We are in the UK. He recounted this tale to me on his return. One of them hits it off with a woman widely presumed to be a lady of the night, and they disappear off to his room. The following morning, there's no sign of him at breakfast, and as the day goes on, they get a bit concerned as nobody can get hold of him. They call police, hospitals, nothing. Later that evening, their buddy shows up and he's been in the hospital. It turns out there was some sort of altercation in the hotel room, which resulted in the guy getting the crap kicked out of him. None payment? Anyway, he says the casino had called him an ambulance, and he had been booked in under Trauma Fred, which is why they couldn't locate him. They head back to his hotel room and it's been cleaned, but cleaned like nothing even went down there. Apparently, this sort of thing is bad for business, so the casinos go to great lengths to deal with these things with discretion and minimal fuss. Story 37. I came back pregnant. At the time, we were planning to have another kid, but this was the very first time we started trying. Literally took that one time that one night and bam, pregnant. Story 38. My ex insisted on a bachelorette in Vegas before our wedding. I get a panicked call from sister in the middle of the night that they lost her, my ex, because she drank too much and became belligerent. She went off with 2 of her bridesmaids who also were not answering phones. And the short of it is that those 2 friends hooked up with random strangers from Vegas that night. My ex claimed she had nothing to do with it, which I believed at the time, but came to realize I was fooling myself. Well, those 2 friends were both in long-term committed relationships that ended when their Vegas antics were revealed. The rest of the bridal party wouldn't speak to my ex for years after this fiasco because of the fallout. My ex somehow held me responsible for the outcome because I rallied the troops, her sisters, and the remaining non-drunk or non-cheating bridal party members to find them, and called all the nearby hotels and venues where I thought they might be when I finally found them. They were in the wrong hotel having a standoff with security, which I successfully de-escalated from 3,000 miles away. I was probably pretty full of myself over resolving a situation with my ex without physically being there, since I usually would just throw her over my shoulder and carry her out of whatever situation she got us into. Which is why I didn't notice the blatantly obvious cheating, and her bridal party kept their mouths shut afterwards. I was in love, and it made me a fool. Story 39. Not me, but my aunt's now ex-boyfriend. He moved out there for a few weeks to build a deck for his mom and sister. Everything seemed fine. Then he started getting dodgy on the phone with my aunt. He invited my mom to come visit him with aunt. Talked a big game of how much fun the three of them would have. The plan was for them to fly there and drive back together. They show up, and there is nothing ready for their arrival. The mom and sister live in a house owned by a woman, Barbara. My aunt learns her boyfriend has been having an affair with Barbara and had been living in Barbara's house. Also, no deck is built. My mom wanted to take the Jeep and just drive back with my aunt, leaving the boyfriend there. Instead, they all came back together in one uncomfortable ride. My aunt did break up with him. She bought the Jeep, but put it in his name so he got to keep it, which sucks. She bought so much for him as she made way more money. He did construction for cash jobs. I later learned this was not the first time he cheated. I had known him since I was a child, and he had been there for us when my dad passed. At first, I both missed him and hated him. Now I just hate him. He lives in Vegas now. Barbara dumped him after a few months. Story 40. I stayed at the Stratosphere Hotel. We went up to the top. They have a roller coaster up there and a few other things to see. While up there, we're having a conversation of, if this place caught on fire, would you burn or jump? After going to bed, a friend from back in Michigan called at about 6 a.m. Pacific time. He's not the kind who's going to call for no reason, so when the phone rang, I figured something happened to my mom or someone in my family. He told me to turn on the TV. I groggily asked what channel. He said any channel. I turned on the TV, and that's how I found out about September 11th. Story 41. I got married in Vegas on Friday. I spent over a year planning this wedding and invited all my family. Turns out the husband comes home with you at the end. Story 42. Not me, but I was there. Went to Vegas for a wedding. We arrive at the venue, and instead of 30 minutes before the ceremony, we're waiting for nearly 2 hours. Eventually, we're ushered in, and the groom is there incredibly sweaty. He apologizes and said he needed to buy a belt, because it's hard to shop in Vegas and lost track of time. Ceremony goes off without a hitch, and the reception is a blast. I left them around 3 a.m. and got a huge burrito. Passed out naked in my bathroom with burrito. They, however, crawl back to their bridal suite, and she jumps into bed and declares her love for him in the day. He tells her he's not in love with her and hasn't been for a year. The next day, they start their 3-week Yes tour with both their families. When they get home to Australia, she finds emails with his affair partner from their wedding day threatening to leave if he went through with the marriage. They're happily divorced now. Story 43. I went to Vegas for a cybersecurity conference. We got to the hotel and my boss said, "We'll all meet back down here in 2 hours." I dropped my bag off, put on shorts and comfortable shoes, and met a Lyft driver inside of 10 minutes. Drove to a medical substances doctor office, got my MMJ card, his the medical dispensary, and was back in my room with edibles and vapes an hour later. I was high all weekend. Story 44. At the after party for my cousin's wedding, we got bottle service at the club. We were having a good time dancing, and his groomsmen were really pushing the shots. I was nearing blackout when my wife went into the bathroom and asked for substances, preferably some coke to wake us up. And she came out with a mushroom chocolate. She held it up in my face, and in my state, I just chomped the whole thing. So then I was blacked out and coming up on shrooms, careening like a drunken sailor. Outside, waiting for the lift, I tried to pivot and fell face first into some gravel. We get back to our hotel, one of those massive complexes with 3 towers, and it's packed at 3 a.m. As my wife leads me by the arm, I'm screaming, "Damn Vegas, I hate Vegas." Hope I at least made a few people's night. I didn't go to work for a week after that, and I certainly haven't been back to Vegas. Story 45. My wife knew this married couple that were just full of drama, both narcissistic, attention-seeking, putting it all out there on Facebook. Anyway, the wife goes to buy groceries one day and finds there's no money in her account. She checks their bank statements and discovers that their bank account had been emptied by not 1 but 2 trips to that bunny ranch in Nevada. Her husband said he was going on a week business trip in Vegas. Turns out their credit cards were maxed out well. When she confronted her husband about this, he first blamed her, saying that she didn't make him feel special when he was leaving for his business trip by not making him a cake. Next, she finds out that he doesn't like her feet, that he went to a brothel and spent all of their money on escort. So yeah, they got divorced. And the kicker was, she was responsible for half of their debt. So after their divorce, she is still paying for his little week-long trip to Vegas. Story 46. I went to a conference about 9 weeks after delivering my firstborn. There was one pumping room that locked with one chair. Quickly, all of us pumping parents figured out that there were many more of us than the conference had planned for. It turned into a pumping party, where I met at least one CEO and a bunch of other badass women in related fields. The conference did what they could to quickly accommodate more of us and plan for more spaces in the future. The experience was really empowering, and we got to exchange stories about how supportive or unsupportive our companies were with regard to family-friendly policies and such. It was a really great little community that we built. I follow many of those folks on LinkedIn to this day, where many also posted about their really cool experience. Story 47. My colleague went to Vegas, ended up at a club, ended up with a girl, and went to a hotel. Paid for the girl using Venmo. His fiancée saw the amount he withdrawn from their shared account. He denied it. I asked him to show her the transactions, and he used as the payment reason. Story 48. Worked for a large tech company, and we had 30K of us going to Vegas for our annual conference. Local police did planning with our HR team and said we should expect at least 1 fatality and 20 arrests based on those numbers. Ended up with 0 deaths and 0 arrests. Story 49. My family and I all went when I was 13. We went for a conference my mom was attending and possibly teaching at. I can't quite remember. She also worked with children, families, and refugees her whole career, so why Vegas? We stayed at Circus. I got my first Osiris skateboard shoes, a Beyblade, and managed to sneak a handful of escort advertisements into my pockets while my parents weren't looking. Story 50. Like 13 years ago, I worked for a big corporation that had a consistent rotating team of 5 people sent to Las Vegas for around 2 years during a huge project. We had a daily expense limit that even today would be considered very generous, and lived in the strip hotels. As a result, we all ate very well every day, and each had a huge list of personal favorite restaurants. The work sucked, but as a food nerd, it was pretty much heaven for me. Especially once I developed good relationships with a few of the hotels as a regular guest. Being 25 with gold or platinum status at MGM is wild. About 6 months after I left, this guy who was considered the golden boy on the team got fired for the dumbest scam ever. Mormon dude who had a big family and was selected as Employee of the Year on a team of several thousand. He was taking cash out of the casino ATMs to pocket it, then expensing the charges as meals. Some people really just can't handle that place. Story 51. Used to go to Consumer Electronics Show every year. The airport would be absolutely insane the day after the show, with everyone returning home. I was flying Southwest, and when I went to check in, the terminal asked me if I wanted to pay an extra $40 for a seat upgrade that also included priority boarding. I said, sure, why not? Well, the boarding also included the priority security line. And after I checked my bag and walked around the corner, I saw the line for security. It was probably 2,000 people long, and it wrapped all the way around the mall area of the terminal multiple times. My flight was in 60 minutes. Because of the seat upgrade, I got to cut 99% of the line, walk way up to the priority security line, and got to the gate with 40 minutes to spare. I definitely would not have made the flight without the upgrade. I feel like that's the luckiest I've ever gotten in Vegas. Story 52. I was doing corporate security for a large, well-known financial institution, and came in Monday morning to a situation where a couple of officers at the company were being removed from access control systems and terminated with haste. I discreetly ask around, and a friend in legal tells me that the officers and several managers went to a conference in Vegas, and after the conference, things got out of hand involving hot tubs and escorts. Story 53. Not me, but a friend. He was going really well at craps, so he decided to maximize his efforts and went and got a lot of money out to be put in chips. Can't remember how much it was, but it was above $8,000. I only know that because I won $8,000 on a slot machine and rubbed it in his face. Anyway, he lost all of it. Think he lost half of what he originally won really quick. So he started going bigger to hope to win big, and proceeded to lose something like 20 straight. He couldn't even get the 50%. His wife was not happy. Sad thing is, had he stuck with what he won, he would have still won a few thousand. Story 54. Wasn't me. But when I lived there, some guy was caught on camera duck some girl he'd met while on the high roller. It was his bachelor trip. They got arrested, and it made national news. Story 55. International work shows in February 2020. Came home and was sick with a horrible cold for almost 3 weeks. A month later, pandemic was all over the news. Pretty sure I got COVID before it was cool. Story 56. Bachelor party. Most of the group were pretty wild. One of the guys was pretty conservative, newly married, and really just there for the support. I will never forget when he kicked open the shared hotel room door in nothing but a candy thong and yelled, "Who wants a taste?" That man became a legend. Story 57. There's a video out in the wild of a bachelorette being encouraged by her friends to make out with a male stripper. Looks like they're in a hotel with loud music and alcohol everywhere. She makes out with the male stripper. But the male stripper wants more. She stops to think about it, but her friends all cheer her on, chanting for her to do it. The male stripper and her have sex in front of her friends on a couch as her female friends scream for support. Not sure if the Bachelorette noticed some 3 cell phone cameras recording her. Video gets leaked out, and her fiancé ends their relationship. Story 58. I went to the Sick New World concert, and my grandpa told me, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," little slogan since it was my first time going. I was there to see my favorite bands, and I specifically wore duck-off socks to assure I never gave an impression to be welcoming. Well, a dude behind me asked about my solar panel battery pack I had on my fanny pack. And when I say love at first sight is an understatement. After that brief conversation, he stayed with me the entire night, and the rest is history. 2 years later, and we are married. Story 59. Not me, but an acquaintance of my wife. She was really drunk in a bar and walked up to a guy and asked if he wanted to get married. He replied with something along the lines of sure. When they sobered up the next morning, they decided that since they were already married, they should make a go of it. They've been together about a decade now. Story 60. Me. I'm what happened in Vegas. My parents met there, and my mother came home pregnant with me. Dad followed, and they got married and stayed together till he died. Story 61. Not the most NSFW thing on earth. We had a girls' trip to Vegas years ago, and one of the girls got drunk, tripped down the stairs, and hit her head hard with a very nasty concussion and got a broken ankle. That was the end of the Vegas trip for her. We had to spend the next day getting her husband to fly in to look after her in the hospital. Story 62. Old friends of ours from the music industry just recently got nailed coming back from Vegas. They were part of an ongoing investigation for Met trafficking and had been assigned ankle monitors by the state while the investigation was continuing. Well, they somehow convinced 2 other people to wear their ankle monitors while they ducked off to Eddie C a week and some change ago. When they got back 3 days ago, they got arrested at the airport and are being held on $500,000 bail each now. They have a kid and a business and a whole life, which they're fixing to lose. Guess they should have stayed in Vegas. Story 63. Had a genius friend, math and physics, that counted cards. After being too obvious and getting substances out the back way and threatened with broken thumbs, he came up with a drunk act. He did really well for a year or 2. Got invited by the nice hotel casinos for free holiday stays. Even drove a vet back once. And then he crashed. He came back from a trip and had lost close to $80,000 that weekend. He was stunned. Story 64. My husband's coworker went to a sales conference in Vegas on behalf of a large multinational HVAC company. Apparently, he enjoyed the beverages too much and ended up bringing a woman back to his hotel room. Long story short, they had sex. He passed out. She stole his corporate credit card, took some pics, and then started extorting him. She threatened to release pics to his wife and work in exchange for money. The dude ended up losing his job. Because it was a for-cause termination, he got no severance or termination pay. Lost it all. Story 65. Met my wife 8 years ago when our moms set us up on a blind date. My wife is a Vegas native, and my mom was trying to get me to move there after she did. My wife ended up moving to me instead. Story 66. Fiancé went to visit Vegas with her parents, and they were recognized and called out by name by some escort. I am so intrigued for the story, but also scared, hesitant. Story 67. One of my coworkers went to Vegas to have a weekend tryst with a C-list celebrity she met in Hollywood a couple weeks prior. He became obsessed with her and threatened to ruin her life. She was engaged to a pediatrician if he couldn't have her. The celebrity finds her fiancé's clinic address and contact information and has his goons to tell him about her infidelity. They broke up after 11 years together and the celebrity ghosted her. He just did it out of spite. Story 68. My huge employer moved 3 regional sales kickoffs to one giant one, 20,000 people, in Vegas. We brought people in from all around the world for 4 days. It was fascinating to hear the daily police reports for our event. We were the slowest week for gambling revenue, second slowest for escort. But we also left 10 people in jail, and one guy, executive, got super drunk and did some stupid stuff, and end his life later. So, not everything stays. Story 69. I got pregnant. Seriously, after 2 years of trying and finally starting to accept that we weren't going to get baby 2, my husband and I went to Vegas for our 7-year anniversary, and I found out about 3 weeks later that I am pregnant. Baby is due in 3 months. Story 70. It was my 21st birthday. I had been celibate for 2 years and decided to let loose in Vegas. As one does, I met a cute Irish boy and went to my room. My best friend got jealous, stole my phone, and called about 10 people to tell them, including my mom. She was kind of a git. What's a harmless secret you've kept forever? Story 1. First marriage to my late wife. On the day of the wedding, the ring got stolen out of my car. I was freaking out. My 2 best men went into overdrive and took a picture I had of the ring and went to I don't know how many jewelry stores explaining what had happened and if they had a ring that was similar. They went to this really great jewelry maker, so said, I have something that is really close. Give me a bit and I can make it perfect. He worked his ass off and got it done with about an hour to spare, plus the managed to get my window fixed. The 3 of us are the only ones who know. I ended up using that jewelry maker for any jewelry I needed. And well, I haven't stopped yet. He ended up telling my best men to not worry about the price and for me to come down after the honeymoon to work it out. I did, and he gave it to me at the cost of the materials. He's a great guy. He retired during COVID. Story 2. In 2009, my best friend was struggling to pay rent when his TV broke, so I went and bought him at the time 42-inch HD TV for over $1,000. I knew he would never accept me spending that much as a gift, so I took it out of the box and put a few small scratches on the back of it, and told him I bought a new TV, and that he could have my old one that I didn't use anymore. Well, he's doing way better now financially, but he has no idea I did that, and I will never tell him. Story 3. When my brother was 4, he won a stuffed animal from a claw machine, and it was his favorite thing ever. Slept with it every night for weeks. He fell asleep on the couch and was carried to bed, but left his stuffed animal on the floor, and the dog decided to tear it to pieces during the night. I spent $40 trying to win another one, and put it under his bed for him to find. Story 4. As a previous nanny, I've seen many first steps and heard many first words, but I never share that. When I leave, I say something like, I think little one is so close to walking, talking. It's a special moment parents deserve. Who am I to take that from them? One baby was walking with me for a full 2 weeks before he showed his new trick to his parents. Story 5. When my wife died, she had been working on special occasion letters for all of our kids. Towards the end, the cancer had spread to her brain, and she wasn't able to focus on writing much. And when she did, it was often unintelligible gibberish. I tried to help her by taking dictation, but she said it would mean more if it was in her own handwriting and wanted to finish it. She slipped into a coma and died after only getting through a handful of letters for our eldest child, leaving addressed envelopes only for our other 2 kids. I knew this would be devastating for the 3 kids, and possibly create conflict, so I paid a woman who specialized in calligraphy to literally duplicate my wife's handwriting. I gave her the content, channeling my wife's comments she made to me about what I thought would be meaningful words to our 3 kids when I had helped her dictate a few. And as she wanted, I've passed them out on special occasions of wedding dates, birth of first child dates, first day of college dates, etc. My kids don't know. They've even shared the ones she actually wrote with ones written by her surrogate, and thus far, the secret remains safe. I haven't told anyone else and hope it stays here a secret as well. I'll take it to my grave. I consider it harmless, as it was her intent, but cancer robs so much from people afflicted with it, including their best, most sincere attempts at helping others cope with the loss themselves. Story 6. In 1998, I had a friend who was stuck in a very toxic situation at her home. She had an opportunity for a new start across country in Oregon. She had a Dodge Neon that was hanging on for dear life and decided to pass on the opportunity for fear the car wouldn't make the trip. I told her I had a friend that was a mechanic that owed me a favor, and he would give the car a tune-up for free. I didn't really have a friend that was a mechanic. We were both 18 with not much money, but I used all of my savings to pay to have her car made roadworthy for the trip. She's a mother of 4 now with a great job and thriving in Oregon. Story 7. My friend is a major death cab for Cutie fan. They came to our city a couple years ago, and I knew she wouldn't be able to afford the tickets to go. She was upbeat about it, but I know she was devastated by it. I bought tickets. 2 days before the show, I told her that the friend I originally planned to take couldn't go, and would she please come with me? There was no other friend. Told her I loved the band and would be sad to miss them. She of course accepted and had the time of her life. She's doing much better now, but every couple of Christmases or birthdays, she gets me some Death Cab merchandise because she knows how much I love the band. I can't stand their music. I literally have them blocked on Spotify, but now it's gone too far where I can't tell her. Story 8. My mom is a health nut, with probably disordered eating, who wouldn't let us have cheese in the house when I was a kid. When I was mid-20s, I bought a unit, and my dad was helping me fix stuff up, so I provided lunch. I said to him, "Bet you're going to hate going back to work next week and not have any cheese on your sandwiches." It was then he told me his deepest secret. He had been buying blocks of cheese at work for years. I had no idea he was crafty, and my mom still doesn't. Poor dad has been retired for years, though, so not sure on the current cheese consumption status. Story 9. One day I came home late at night drunk and decided to walk my dog. Just when we arrived outside my house, my dog attacked a raccoon hanging around the area. I ended up wrestling my Malamute and freed the raccoon from his jaws. Here's the thing. I was drunk and the raccoon kind of just stared at me in front of me, and I decided to try and pet the raccoon. I got maybe one pet in before it took a chunk out of my finger. I ran into the house, leaving a trail of blood up to my brother's room for help. A sleepless night in the hospital and 4 consecutive rabies shots later was the result. Everyone asked me what happened, and I just told them while I heroically wrestled my dog to save the raccoon, I got bit in the process. They still don't know the real story. It still gets brought up 10 years later. Story 10. My mom was an addict, so my siblings and I grew up with very little. Normally, she would pull her head out enough around the holiday season to sign up with a church or charity to get us a food box and some presents. However, by the time I was 11, she was so far gone we could go weeks without seeing her leave her room or her be completely gone from the house. I entered a drawing contest at my school around this time. I won a $100 gift certificate to our local mall. One day, after making sure my siblings made it to school, I played hooky and walked to the mall, about 3.5 miles. I bought my 3 siblings some presents. Almost forgot to get myself something, ended up buying some discounted body wash. Then had them wrapped there at the mall before trekking home. I hid the presents in the crawl space till the 24th. I was right, our mom did nothing. When my siblings were distracted by a movie, I snuck out and put the box of presents on the front porch before knocking and running away. I snuck back in the back door by the bathroom and heard my siblings yelling, "Someone left a box on the porch that says Merry Christmas." I'd also spent the last week before winter break going door to door asking for canned food donations, saying it was for a food drive at my church. I didn't have a church, so that we didn't spend the whole winter break hungry. I'm so glad all 4 of us made it out of our childhood, and not one of us took the same path as the woman who birthed us. Story 11. When I was about 15 or 16, I had a sleepover with about 10 of my friends and my sister. I decided to have some fun with them and pretended to sleep talk. They recorded it on a cassette tape, and I figured it would just be a fun, harmless prank. Well, nearly 30 years later, they still keep bringing it up. They still don't know that I was faking, and I don't know how to tell them at this point because so much time has passed. That tape is still floating around. I hate it when they bring it up, and they think it's because I'm embarrassed about sleep talking. But the reality is, it was just a stupid prank I played when I was a teenager. And I just never in a million years thought that it would still be going 3 decades later. I want this to just ducking die already. Nobody knows my secret except for you, random strangers on Reddit. Story 12. I convinced my sister I'd entered us both in a blog giveaway. I won a coupon, but she won the grand prize, a $300 gift card to Lane Bryant. My sister was a size 16 and desperately needed new clothes, but would spend money on her baby grandkids and thin adult daughters. This was the only way I could make sure she spent it on herself. It's been 10 years. She doesn't know. Story 13. Dad, I lied that day in kindergarten when I said I had a tummy ache and needed to go home. I was totally fine. I was just super bored and wanted to spend time with you. Story 14. I used to live in a dorm hall when I was an undergrad. There was this one guy in the dorms who had a mat outside his door. I always thought it was a little weird because, 1, you had to walk a long way through carpet to get to the door, so your shoes would surely be mostly clean by that point. And 2, anyone could just simply take it. I kinda just assumed someone would steal it eventually. But after about a month, I noticed it was still there. I obviously wasn't going to steal someone's stuff, but I did want to mess with it, so I simply moved it to the door across the hall. The next day, I saw it had been moved back, so I decided to move it across the hall again. I did this for an entire year. Sometimes they'd give up and leave it at the other door for a week. Then I'd just move it back to duck with them. I loved the idea that it surely led to some sort of argument between the 2 neighbors because nobody is going to think some guy is just randomly deciding to duck with them for no reason. I literally never met either of the people that lived in those rooms. I just kept messing with their mat. I had some special moments with it too. On Christmas, I replaced the mat with a Christmas one and then put the original one back the next day. On Easter, I bought the cheapest, craptiest Easter basket I could find and filled it with granny candies like Weathers and those strawberry candies. Then I hid it under the mat. At one point, I bought a second mat to just sometimes put at both doors, then take the second mat away randomly. Eventually, I moved into an apartment and couldn't mess with them anymore, though. They never got to find out what the heck was going on. Story 15. Only my immediate family know I threw a birthday party when I was 13 and no one came. I remember sitting at the window crying, looking out for any cars to come. I never told anyone else about this because I didn't want to seem like a massive loser. Still don't. Even the kids who didn't turn up, I told them my neighbors and friends from extracurricular came, so even they don't know. Story 16. I farted in a physics tutoring class consisting of 10 people, including the tutor. A friend started yelling about the air conditioner having a bad smell. He suspected a bird or a mouse died there. Finally, we all had to move to continue the class in another room. Until this day, no one in this group knows that I farted. Story 17. When I had just got my license, I was kind of an idiot, as are most 16-year-old boys. It was snowing, and I thought I would try to drift my car into a McDonald's parking lot from the road. I failed, obviously, and went down an embankment into another parking lot. Thankfully, my car was mostly okay. I had to replace a quarter panel and a headlight, but nothing too serious. I told my parents I was avoiding a head-on collision and hit black ice. I've never told them the truth, even though it has been 20 years since that incident. I could tell them, and they wouldn't care really, but I just haven't, and probably never will. This is the first time I have ever told anyone the truth about that day. Story 18. I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 3. On my 9th birthday, my grandma made a birthday cake for me, which was big enough for us all to share at the family party. Since there was so much food, we had plenty of leftover cake for the next few days. which I was only allowed to eat a little bit of. When no one was around, I snuck into the kitchen and ate a couple slices of the leftover cake. Plus, I picked huge chunks of the icing off. It looked pretty haphazard by the time I snuck away again. My parents soon found the remains of the cake. Since I'm diabetic, they didn't suspect that it was me who picked at the leftovers. I was usually a very well-behaved kid. They blamed it on our rather chubby cat and promptly deemed it unacceptable for human consumption. It was a believable scenario because she had stolen human food in the past. Sadly, they threw the rest of the cake out. I could never own up to it because I would have been in trouble for compromising my blood sugar levels and for being greedy. My old cat never ratted me out for letting her take the blame, though. Thanks, Molly. R.I.P. Story 19. My dad is a doctor. When my daughter was little, she was terrified of hurting her ankle. Like anytime she got the slightest twinge or rolled it slightly, she was convinced it was broken. My dad would take her to the office and run a fetal heart Doppler over her little ankle and tell her it was an X-ray machine and her ankle was fine. She's 13 and still convinced that Papa took actual X-rays of her ankle. I'm never going to tell her otherwise. Story 20. I once told a girl I was dating I loved the dish she cooked for me. In reality, it was terrible. 25 years later, my wife is still cooking it at least once a month because it's my favorite. I've never been able to tell her, but now I've let my 8-year-old daughter in on it. She'll prance up to my wife and say, "Let's cook Daddy's favorite tonight." Then she turns around and looks me dead in the eye with a crap-eating grin on her face. Story 21. I ate the crumble off the top of my mom's apple crisp and blamed it on the cat. Years after the cat passed, my parents tell the story of how she ate the crumble as a cute anecdote. Story 22. When I was dating my now wife, her son took my car for a joyride while we were out of town. When we got back from our out-of-town trip, I noticed something was amiss on my car. When I got in it, I noticed the sunshade was installed backwards. I would never do that on accident. I then pulled the dashcam footage. He took it around the neighborhood. He didn't do any donuts or burn any tires. Just a nice, slow stroll through the neighborhood with the music playing, and I assume waved, and some people. I ended up just handling it man to man. He was like 18 at the time. I never told his mom about it. Story 23. I can't remember why, but I was mad at my dad for something. As revenge, I added extra chili powder and hot sauce to our family chili. Turns out my family never really added enough seasoning to the chili as it was. And the food actually tasted a lot better as a result of my revenge tactic. I've overcorrected as an adult on seasoning food at times, but I do make a mean chili. Story 24. Every Christmas, I would write a fake Christmas newsletter, like those letters some people send every year with updates about their life, family, etc., and send it to my parents. I made up this guy who was a huge blowhard, but believable enough that my dad thought maybe he had worked with him at some point in the past. I had a spreadsheet to keep track of his job, wife, children, grandchildren, holidays, etc., so that I could stay accurate from year to year. My parents would get so annoyed at his arrogant writing style, but I was really proud of it. It went on for 6 or 7 years, but then his twin granddaughters graduated high school, and I stopped. Story 25. I was about 10 years old and was pretending to be sick to avoid going to school. This was the 1980s, so the old school glass tube, mercury-filled thermometers were still a thing. My dad was getting ready to leave for work as I worked my magic to convince my mom to let me stay home for the day. Neither one of them was having it. I persisted. Out of frustration, my mom grabbed the thermometer and put it under my tongue. I knew it would read 98.6, and this was my only shot to avoid school for the day. Both of my parents stepped out of the room for a moment. I looked over and saw my dad's piping hot cup of coffee sitting on the counter awaiting his morning commute. I quickly dipped the thermos into the hot Java. It instantly shattered, emptying the toxic mercury into the coffee along with tiny shards of glass. I panicked. In my mind, there were only a couple possible outcomes. My dad dies of heavy metal poisoning and a lacerated esophagus. Or I fess up to what I did. I could hear them coming around the corner, about to return to the kitchen. At the last possible second, I swatted my dad's mug off the kitchen counter, smashing it on the floor, creating a coffee explosion in my mom's freshly cleaned kitchen. They burst in the kitchen aghast at the mess I created. I reply with a flurry of sorries and apologize profusely for being clumsy. My dad is furious because now he won't have coffee on his way to work. My mom is pissed and she starts cleaning up the mess. In the chaos, everyone forgets about my claims of illness. I slipped the remainder of the broken thermo into the trash and went to the bus stop, saving my father from a horrible death, at least in my mind at the time. Until this day, I have never told anyone about this. Story 26. I'm Canadian, and in high school, I had a crush on this girl who was originally born in the US. To try and impress her, I pretended I was an American who immigrated to Canada too. I was so committed that I even gave her the address of my old home. It was really just a hotel I had stayed in while on vacation in Florida with my family. Since it was the early 2000s, she never verified. We didn't end up dating, but to this day, I never came clean. I wonder if she still thinks I'm an American. Story 27. When I first met my wife's 93-year-old grandma about 13 years ago, she had me try her holiday dish, congealed salad. It's basically lime jello made with condensed milk, and it has pineapple, walnuts, marshmallows, and celery mixed in, and it is poured into a bundt cake pan to set. It's a terrible, old-timey Southern dish. She was so excited to let me try it that I panicked and said it was amazing. She absolutely lit up, and every year since then, she has exponentially increased the amount she makes, because she knows how much I love it. The bundt cake pan has long since been replaced with a literal punch bowl. The rest of the family knows I hate it, and it's just silently accepted that I will eat huge amounts of it each year instead of telling her the truth. Story 28. When I tell people I read a lot, I leave out that it's fan fiction. Hermione fan fiction. That's semi-explicit Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger. I know, it's my secret shame. Fan fiction. It's awkward when people want to know what I'm reading, and I have to make something up. I'm so deep in the closet, I'm rubbing shoulders with Tom Cruise here. Story 29. I bought a surprise plane ticket to see my long-distance girlfriend after 1 year apart. She told me there was somebody else some days before the flight. Story 30. Every Thanksgiving in San Luis Obispo, my best friend and I are in charge of pies. We go to the Madonna Inn, a gloriously outlandish hotel, restaurant, bakery, resort, and ask for 2 of their pie boxes. We then go to Safeway and buy 2 much cheaper pies and put them in the boxes. We bring them to our large family gathering, and everyone compliments the wonderful pies because of how amazing the Madonna Inn's reputation is for baked desserts. I'd like to say this is because of concerns about cost, or because the Safeway pies are better. But the truth is, my BF and I have been doing this for about a decade now, and it's just become one of our favorite traditions together. Story 31. Man. My secret story is not as heartwarming as the others on here, but I feel like writing it out anyhow. My little sister loved dragons and collected little inexpensive statues and toys. I was 15 years old and had my first job working at Friendly's. I saved up my money to buy her something way out of my price range for her birthday. It was this tiny statue, over $100, a fortune for a teen, because it was adorable and perfect. A dragon just coming out of an egg. I was so excited to give it to her. My mom, who honestly has a novel's worth of issues, had no money and hadn't planned. 2 nights before my little sister's birthday, she told me she hadn't gotten her anything at all, so I gave it to my mom to give to her. It made me sad not to have much of a present for my sister. I gave her a card and some candy, but I knew her heart would break if mom gave her nothing. 30 years later, and I still haven't told. Story 32. There was one time when my boyfriend and I forgot there was rice in the rice cooker and it got flies. I eventually remembered and went to clean it out and got so grossed out that I couldn't do it. A little later, we were cleaning the kitchen and I casually asked my boyfriend to clean the rice cooker, knowing it was full of gross. He opened it, was incredibly grossed out, but still cleaned it. It's been years since this happened, but I've been so embarrassed by my conduct that I've never admitted that I knowingly sent him to take down the rice cooker. I feel like I owe him an apology, but that would require me to admit it, and I can't. We're a very open couple and have had much more difficult conversations. Just the usual relationship stuff that rises in an LTR. But for some reason, this incredibly low-stakes secret just makes me cringe so hard that I can't bring myself to say anything. I will take this secret to my grave. Story 33. When I was about 16 or 17, I wanted a cat so badly, and my mom had consistently been saying nope all my life. So I went in the classifieds at the back of the newspaper, found someone giving away free kittens, and I went and got one. When my mom came home that day, I told her that I met a man down by the docks with a cardboard box full of kittens, and he was going to throw it in the water if he couldn't get rid of them. So I took one. She did try to give her away a few times to various friends, but nobody wanted a kitten, and she got attached to her, to the point that she wouldn't let me take her with me when I moved out for university. She loves telling that story of how we ended up with a cat that I wasn't supposed to get, and that sweet baby lived to be almost 20 in the end. She brought home many mice and birds, and once, a weasel. I named her Turnip, after Baldrick's turnip in Blackadder. Rip Turnip. You lived a lie, but you were loved, and your fake origin story continues to delight at the dinner table. Story 34. My mom, dad, people in our community kept spotting me driving to this back parking lot at a local government complex. They asked me what I was doing, and told them it was a great place to stargaze, because it was kind of off the main road. Even 20 years later, I still get comments if I'm going to go stargazing. No, that was my makeout sex spot in high school. I think they know. Story 35. My mom lent my now mother-in-law her trifle dish for Christmas dinner. It was the last thing my mom had of her sister, as she had died suddenly that year. They were super close, and trifle was their thing. My mother-in-law dropped it, and she replaced it with the exact same one. No idea how, as the original was pretty old. We decided never to tell my mom. It's sort of a running joke now at Christmas. We wind my mother-in-law up, and every time it's mentioned, she is hysterical, having to relive the moment she dropped it all over again. Story 36. One day when I came from homeschool, my mom had locked me out of the house. So I went into the jitty and randomly decided to skim some stones. The milkman had come and left 4 milk bottles near our gate. So I casually skimmed a stone at them and managed to smash all of them with 1 stone. Told my mom it was like that when I got there. Mom got annoyed at the other rascals that were around and not me. Complete win. I also stole someone's milk from their doorstep one day when I was around 11 because we had no milk and I wanted a cup of tea. Story 37. I love telling people I placed first in a national competition for Shotokan karate. So naturally people assume I'm a really good fighter. I placed first in kata. I'm just really good at choreography. Story 38. I intentionally bombed a math competition in middle school because I didn't like the teacher over the program or being forced to do it by my parents. I blamed it on nerves and was not asked back. Story 39. I bought a decommissioned fire chief's vehicle from the Richmond Fire Department auction and got them to donate it to my grandmother. She never would have accepted it if it came from a family member. Story 40. When I was 6, my older brother and I were pondering what the female versions of our names would be. I decided mine, Nate, would be Natalie. But my brother cuts me off before I could declare and said, "You think yours is Natalie, don't you?" No, I stammered back and refused to tell him the real name. Fast forward over 2 decades to today, we're in our early 30s, and somehow that convo comes back up. He laughs and says, "It was Natalie, wasn't it?" In my head, the ancient pride of a tinier version of me roars and demands I refuse to acknowledge he was right. Every other part of my brain facepalms at how ridiculous a hill to die on this is. And we compromise by telling him, "What argument? Sorry, I don't remember that." "Oh, I remember, dear brother, but I will never confess." Story 41. I was 7 and we were moving from one farm to a bigger one. Mom was taking garbage out to the burn barrel and burning it. In the rural 80s, we just burned everything. I started looking at the fire when she went back inside and discovered a burning ice cream lid. I picked it up and threw it like a frisbee, and it did a nice arc and landed right at a large stack of hay that was quite a ways away. I was horrified and went running in and told Mom some paper had floated up and onto the hay. Other than the huge stack of hay burning down, there was no harm done. It was old hay anyway, that's why it wasn't stored in the barn. Story 42. In kindergarten, some kid I didn't know too well took one of those plastic clips that hold bread bags together, snapped it in half, and gave me one of the pieces, saying, "This is your key to the magic door, and this one is my key to the magic door." And then he left. That seemed reasonable to me, so I took it home and poked it into any properly sized indentation I could find to try and find the magic door that it unlocked. After accidentally unscrewing a couple of outlet covers from the wall, I eventually got bored and lost the key somewhere. But a few days later, it hit me. I'd just taken that crappy half of a plastic tab from the kindergarten without asking a grown-up. That was stealing. I was a pretty straight-edged kid. So stealing anything at all was about the worst misdeed I could imagine. But here I was, having outright robbed my own school of this valuable object, and nobody even knew about it. Anyway, I resolved to never tell anybody about my horrible crime, and it has remained a secret until this very day. I hope all of you out there can forgive me. Story 43. I once paid my mom's phone bill when I knew she was low on money. I got on her account on her phone while she was doing other things. And I know her passwords, so it was pretty easy. Added my card as a one-time payment, only so it wouldn't save to her account, and paid. She figured she just forgot she paid it, and that's why she thought she was low on money. My mom is ADHD and so am I, so forgetting stuff is very common. Story 44. When I was younger, 15-year-old, I used to secretly go down to our living room and out the back door to smoke. Our house had an alarm with sensors, including one upstairs in my parents' bedroom, which would start blinking if it registered movement. I was just able to watch the terminal from the backyard to the hallway to detect movement and not get caught, hopefully. My dad, whom I lost 3 years ago due to COVID, was a diabetic and frequently came downstairs for some sweets because his blood sugar would get too low. One night, I went down and did the usual, slide aside the slats as quietly as possible, open door, have a quick smoke, and back to my room like a ninja. Suddenly, the terminal starts to flicker. I flick the cig across the fence and try to slide the slats back the way they were as fast and quiet as possible before he reaches the bottom of the stairs. No way I make it past him, so I hide behind the couch. He comes down, grabs some sweets, and he sits down on the same couch I'm behind. My heartbeat must have been over 200 beats per minute at that time, but I remain silent until he gets up to go back to bed. He never knew I was there otherwise. I might have lost him sooner, but it makes for a good laugh with my mom these days. Story 45. I always knew my first boyfriend is gay, and still I agreed to be his Jeff at the time. He never told me that during the time we were together, and I've never initiated the conversation. We're from very conservative country, so I understand he was just super scared to come out, or even acknowledge he's gay. We have never done anything dirty, but we could spend a lot of time together as friends, and it was awesome. We were 15 at the time. He came out to me a few years later, and I never said anything. Many people tried to make me a victim on the way, but I'll protect this guy to the day I die. We love each other. He's my family, even though we don't talk as much anymore. I live in another country. Totally pure and awesome man. I'll always support him. Story 46. When my friend moved into her first apartment, she didn't have any tools for basic repairs. I spent a few hundred on a tool bag, socket set, screwdrivers, cordless drill, wrenches, level, etc. Took everything out of the packaging and gave her the bag of tools. I told her they were my extras and showed her how to do some of her repairs. She still doesn't know everything was brand new and, frankly, nicer than my own tool set. Story 47. At university, my best friend and I went to the bathroom on a night out, and as we were using the urinals, he exclaimed how Greg, a slightly older guy at the same school, was such in a hole. I pointed to a cubicle and mouthed how Greg was inside. My friend went bright red and died inside and permanently avoided Greg for the rest of our time there. Just the other day, about 5 years later, it came up and I had totally forgotten. I finally told him I'd made it up. Story 48. My daughter lost her favorite stuffed animal and was devastated. I went online and found a replacement on eBay for an insane price, because it turns out her stuffed puppy was a collector's edition, FML, and the one I found was in mint condition. I then rubbed it in dirt, washed it a few times, and ripped off its leather on its nose and filled it in with black permanent marker, all so it matched the one she had. We then told her that her puppy had been found, and the joy on her face made the expense and time it took crafting it well worth it. She is 13 now and still keeps her puppy on her bed. I plan to take this to my grave. Story 49. If anyone was at the Hyatt Regency in Columbus, right before the Origins Game Fair in 2018, I have your white noise machine. You left it in the hotel room. I didn't even realize for half my stay. I was like, oh, this is actually really convenient, figuring it was just a new thing the hotel was doing. That is, until I visited my friend's room, where they didn't have one, then noticed I could unplug the one in my room and realized it must have been left behind. I told the front desk about it, but they insisted it didn't need to be moved to a lost and found. Told them to tell me if anyone called looking for it, but no one did. So thank you, forgetful stranger. It has actually helped immensely with my sleep. Story 50. My younger sister and I would sneak a Christmas present from under the tree, surgically remove the tape, carefully unwrap the gift to see what it is, and then wrap it back exactly how it was. Put it back under the tree exactly how it was. Story 51. I helped a friend out with ad money on her blog and views and YouTube stuff. I would regularly click on ads on different devices so she could get the money from them. I also used multiple devices and accounts to help her get a boost on her blog and her YouTube channel. I would write in different ways and say different things to make sure they all didn't sound too similar. Also, being bilingual helps. So I was able to write in English and Spanish. She's gotten a big enough following. She doesn't need it anymore, but to this day, she doesn't know it was me who left all of those encouraging comments and likes and reposts and thing of that nature. Story 52. My wife lost one of her favorite pair of gold earrings her parents gave her. She could not find the other after weeks of trying. It had sentimental value as it was a 16th birthday gift, so I knew she'd never want another set. So I took the one she had around our big city to jewelers and shops until I found a matching one. Eventually found one, bought the pair. Dirtied it up at home and let her find it in her sock drawer. Still have the other hidden in my desk in case she loses the other. Story 53. My freshman year of high school, my math teacher was a young, lonely woman. To be fair, she overshared a little bit and indicated to us that she really wanted to get married but couldn't find anyone. Somehow, these immature freshmen all let it go. They never made fun of her. Nobody ever did. Literally 0 jokes were ever made at her expense. At least not that I ever knew about. That was the state of affairs until my senior year, when the school hired a new math teacher for seniors. He was roughly the same age as my freshman year math teacher, and he gave off sad, lonely guy vibes. But nobody ever made fun of him either, somehow. About halfway through my senior year, I was wandering around the halls during class for some reason or another. I passed by the freshman teacher's classroom and stopped. There, I saw the two of them standing together in her classroom. They were holding hands, making googly eyes and smiling at each other. They never saw me. I started walking again, determined to act like I saw nothing. I never told anyone, because I was concerned that if those teachers hadn't been made fun of for being unhappily single, which was sort of a miracle, then their luck could run out now and they might be subjected to inappropriate jokes for finally meeting someone. And I didn't want that. A fike, which isn't saying much. Their relationship never became public knowledge while they worked together at the school. Story 54. At our 6th grade Halloween party, I found my crush's favorite watch in the garbage bin with a broken band. Took it out, fixed it, gave it back to her. When her friend pestered me, why would you fix that for her? I lied and said someone else told me to, not wanting to be found out for having feelings for her. Story 55. My best friend in high school worked hard after school and on weekends in a butcher shop to earn money. He had healthy savings balance and really wanted an Xbox so we could play Halo. But his parents wouldn't let him buy one, even though he'd earned more than enough on his own. I knew HTML, so I made a fake website for an Australian gaming magazine advertising a competition to win an Xbox. He entered the competition and won it. We faked the email telling him he'd won. We bought an Xbox from the local store and went straight to the local post office and faked the sender's address on the label. 2 days later, it turned up at his home. He showed his parents the website, the email, and the postage, and they believed him. We spent the rest of the summer hanging out playing Halo. So good. Story 56. I've always been a night owl. When I was in elementary school, I'd slip into the living room and watch late-night TV until the channels went off the air. Story 57. I worked at Virgin Mobile, now Virgin Plus, so I sold people's phones and cell phone plans to them. I was closing by myself one evening at a kiosk in another mall. I had been asked to cover a shift, when a woman came in pretty close to closing time, like maybe a half hour before. She had explained to me that a local women's shelter had given her money to get a SIM card and prepaid plan, and they had given her just enough to cover the first month of a specific plan we had. She was at the women's shelter after fleeing an abusive relationship, had to delete all her social media profiles, change her emails, phone number, and was even in the process of changing her name because her partner had almost hit her and was looking for her. I remember I could still see the bruises on her face and arms. Problem was, the shelter hadn't given her enough to cover the taxes. I live in Canada, in a province where the tax rate is 15%, or the SIM card fee. She told me she just had to check her bank account to see if there was money in there to pay, even though her ex had drained it after he discovered she'd ran. If she covered the taxes herself, she would have had less than $2 left to her name and the clothes on her back. My heart ached for her, being a survivor of domestic abuse myself. I got her phone number and first top-up all set up, and when it got to the total owed, she had taken out her debit card, and I just told her not to worry about it. I didn't make her pay for any of it because I couldn't possibly fathom leaving this woman with no money when she was already scared, hurt, and starting her entire life over. She immediately started sobbing, thanked me for being so kind, hugged me, and left. I've never told anybody except my current partner, and definitely nobody I worked with. Story 58. When Elle was 10 and my younger brother was 5, Elle pranked him and scared him so badly he craps his pants. He cried, and Elle felt so bad that Elle cleaned him, his pants, and the place in the hall where he crapped. I never told anyone. At 10 years old, that crap would have been hilarious to friends and family. Story 59. My dad claimed to have ducked my friend's mom in a pub toilet when they were younger. He told me one night when we were pissed together, I believe him. My friend could be incredibly competitive and annoying, but I always resisted the urge to tell him, "My dad ducked your mom." Story 60. I collect antique glassware. Consequently, I frequent thrift stores. One particularly cold January day, years and years ago, I was at my local large national thrift store that I won't name because they've become a monster. As usual, I was looking through the glassware which they had displayed directly across the aisle from children's clothing. A family of 4 was there, mother, father, and 2 daughters. They were looking at winter coats and boots. The youngest had picked out the loudest, pink, glittery coat I have seen in my entire life. For whatever reason, their card wouldn't work at the register. I was in line behind them. I heard the mother remark, "I was sure our benefits went on today. Girls, we may have to wait on your coats because Daddy needs the boots for his new job. I don't have enough money for boots and coats, and I can't get the card to work." As cashier hash 1 kept trying their card, cashier hash 2 offered to check out my purchase at the register on the other side. I told her to put their order on mine and to not mention it. She gave me a conspiratorial smile and nodded. As I gathered my things and left, I heard her say, "Let me try my machine. Sometimes that one is so finicky." Satisfied that I had released some positive energy into the world, I went home and never thought anything more of it. Until the next week, I stopped by after school care one late afternoon to pick up my youngest daughter. The kids were out on the playground. My daughter came running up to me with another little girl in tow, whom she described as her new best friend. The girl told me that she was new to the school. Their family had recently moved to our town because her father got a new job here because his old job closed. It was then I noticed the pink glittery coat. True to her word, my daughter has been best friends with that girl since that day. I've become friends with the girl's mother and father because of her friendship with my daughter. The father quickly rose in the ranks of our local factory. He's now a manger. The mother and I have run fundraisers for various local charities, and, at one point, we worked at the same place. She doesn't know that I helped her family when they were at their lowest point, and she never will. Story 61. When I went to college, my parents sold my childhood home and moved to a different town about an hour away. We were all sad to leave it, but it didn't make sense for them to stay there with an empty nest. About a decade and a half later, we learned through the Gvine that it had again been sold to a developer who planned to massively renovate it, which would render it unrecognizable. Mom and I decided to drive by to see the house one last time before that happened. It was sad to pull up to the house and see that they had already torn up the lawn and bushes I had planted with my dad when I was a kid, but the house was still untouched. Mom waited in the car while I went to peek in the window next to the front door. Well, when I was a teenager, I was pretty skinny and used to get into the house by sticking my arm through the mail slot rather than ever carrying a key. The place was completely empty, and I impulsively decided to just go for it. My arm barely fit, but I managed to unlock the door and got to have the experience of walking through my childhood home one last time. It was an indescribably meaningful experience for me to relive old memories in that space. On my way back to the car, I noticed a little statue peeking out from under the porch. It must have been hidden in the bushes for years, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a bunny statue that had belonged to my mom. I grabbed it and ran back to the car, and my mom floored it out of there before any nosy neighbors noticed us. We drove away laughing our heads off, and she still has the bunny statue in her garden to this day. Story 62. I write stories about my friends and I being heroes and stuff. I hope they wouldn't be creeped out by it. They make great characters, and it's fun to imagine. Story 63. Every time I get invited over to a family's house during the Christmas season, but before Christmas Day, I always sneak an extra present under someone's tree. I put the full name of the intended recipient on the present, but I leave the from section blank or use an alias. It's usually something easy, like a blanket or bath stuff or a fire stick or a chocolate box or whatever. One year, my friend got socked by a bunch of different life expenses, and he knew he probably wasn't getting much of anything from his wife as a result. So I snuck a tactical flashlight under his tree and listed Santa in the from part. I knew he wanted something like that. So I got it for him and deposited it under his tree when they invited me over for dinner about a week ahead of time. It made his whole Christmas to open it up on Christmas Day. At first, he was convinced his wife gave it to him, but she denied it, and her handwriting doesn't match mine. To this day, they don't know it was me who gave it to him, but he still mentions how happy he was even now sometimes. Story 64. It's kind of a heartbreaking one, but I was the first to know about my grandmother's stroke from 6,000 miles away. My grandmother passed about a decade ago. She was 95. Stroke took her out. She was initially given 24 hours. She held on for 3 weeks, long enough for her 4 kids and 4 grandkids to rush to her bedside from different corners of the world to say their goodbyes. I was born and raised abroad, Europe. My grandmother lived in Florida at the time. My father and her were really close, so they'd chat on Skype on a daily basis. There was a 6-hour time difference, and he had her Skype configured so that it would always pick up the call, even if she wasn't home to answer the call. Her computer was set up in her guest room. The day of her stroke, it was a Tuesday, and I was homesick from school that day. I climbed the steps to my dad's home office and told him we needed to call Mimi, the name I called her, right away. He said, not now, that he had a call starting shortly. But I insisted. Something deep inside me just felt off. He tried to say no again, but I relented and insisted, so he called her. I stood behind his desk chair as we waited for Skype to answer our call. Skype picks up our call. All we see is an arm waving in the air. We peek a little more closely. She's laying on the ground, barely conscious. I distinctly remember my father turning around in his chair, tears in his eyes, asking me, "How did you know?" Like I said, something in my gut just felt off. Thankfully, she already lived in an assisted living facility at the time, so we called the front desk of her facility, who called 911, etc. From 6,000 miles away, thanks to technology, we were able to watch them do their thing in real time, and we were able to share with them her medical history, meds, etc. Within 12 hours, we were both on a flight from Europe to Florida. Story 65. When I was 20, I moved into a flat with 2 30-year-olds that were really selfish. They were charging double price for the 4th room. Now that I think of it, I was probably charged more than they were paying too, in the house so they both could pay less for their own rooms. I wanted to have a friend there to feel less alone, and my guy mate was first-year apprentice on low wages. I told him it was way cheaper and he moved in. I told the 30-year-olds I would pay half his room if they let me have a friend move in. So yeah, he got subsidized rent because I needed a companion after a bad breakup. I ended up dating his best friend. And us 3 moved out into a better place without the 2 people who just wanted flatmates to make money off. And I married his best friend, and he is now a qualified electrician making crap loads of cash, so we all win. Story 66. My parents bought me a book of world history when I was a child. It had beautiful illustrations. They know it was one of my favorite books growing up. What they don't know is the fact that those beautiful illustrations were frequently of naked women was a significant factor in it being one of my favorite books. I did wind up with a lifelong love of reading and history, so mission accomplished. Story 67. I had my niece remind my sister that it was our mom's 70th birthday. No party because it was the height of the COVID pandemic. After my mom lamented that my siblings hadn't said happy birthday. I still haven't told my mom. Story 68. I have a friend who sometimes goes through some hard times financially. They've had a pretty tough hand dealt to them in life. Smart as hell, but one of those people who it seems always has something going wrong. It culminated with them losing a leg in a car accident that was entirely not their fault. 2 seconds on either side and they'd have been fine. Anyway, Over the years, I've secretly given them cash and gifts. All online, all anonymously. Anything from paying for a year of LiveJournal back in the day to buying stuff off their Amazon wish list to anonymously sending money to a Patreon they have for some of their creative work. Why anonymously? Well, we tend to like each other, but we have some very differing views about the world and have bickered in the past. Nothing like MAGA versus sanity. We're just both highly opinionated. They take a pretty negative view of the world, and I don't blame them. But by having an anonymous benefactor, I hope they somewhat realize that there's some good in the world that's there just for doing good. I've never told a soul about this other than this post. Story 69. As a kid, I constantly got in trouble for putting things in my mouth. One day when I was about 6, I accidentally swallowed a couple of coins. Even through the massive episode of violent vomiting and subsequent hospital visit, I never confessed to swallowing the coin because I didn't want to get in trouble. Story 70. My last day at the restaurant I worked at in college. Somebody broke into 2 workers' cars. $2,000 total was stolen. 1, a guy whose car broke down and was in the shop, and he was borrowing his friend's car. His cash was to pay for his own car. 1, a single mom who was saving up for her community college tuition for the next semester. Both completely broke down in the office when they learned about it. I was closing that night, so I went into the manager's office when it was just the 2 of us, and pulled my own cash savings for the month, about $1,400, and split it, $600, $800, asked the manager to put them in unmarked envelopes, and give them to the servers on their next shift. I never saw a single person from that restaurant again. I checked the guy server's Facebook a couple days later, and he had posted, "God is so good," so I know he got the money. I have no idea where they're at now, but I hope they're in better places. Story 71. My brother has had a rough few years and had been trying to figure out what he wanted to do in life for a career. At one point, he was doing door-to-door sales for greener energy during the pandemic. Proud of him for working and trying to find something, but it was not what he wanted to do, but it did give him a lot of perspective. Fast forward a few years, and he finds his passion in helping people. And after some pretty large life events, he begins to train to become a life coach. It is a perfect fit for him. It was the first time I saw him this passionate around a career, but he had no clue how to run the business side. I connected him with an old colleague who helps small business or individuals how to basically have a livelihood, but still provide support to people they want to be able to provide. I know how good she is at her job, and she said he was good fit and she could train him for $5,000 over 3 months. I paid it happily and told her to come up for some story why he didn't need to pay. She has helped him a lot, and he is funneling people to her now for the same help. I haven't told anyone besides the person helping my brother. It is not important to me that he knows. I'm just super happy and excited to see what he does and the good he will bring to people. Story 72. I was playing checkers when someone taught me what stealing was. Board games at daycare had missing pieces sometimes, so I asked where some went. My friend told me they were probably stolen. At any rate, I learned what stealing was, and I took 1 checker. I kept it in my pocket until I got home and put it in my little kid safe my grandma bought me. Then the next day, I took it out and brought it back because I was so scared I would get into trouble for stealing. I haven't told anyone. Story 73. I threw away my uncle's adult film. We all lived together, and I found it on accident. I got super scared because I was a sheltered kid and didn't know what I was looking at. I panicked that I'd get in trouble, and so I threw it away. No one got mad from what I remember, and I don't think he ever asked anyone about it since no one brought it up. Story 74. At a Six Flags amusement park I went to with my kids. They had a live magician show, and I got called onto the stage to be a participant in the magician's mind-reading trick, involving the magician drawing something on a pad. So the audience could see and then telepathically transmitting the image to me to draw, or maybe it was the other way around, I can't remember. To be sure I could not see or hear anything, a helmet contraption was placed on my head, covering my eyes and ears. Once the helmet was in place, a recording only I could hear played, telling me that everybody in the audience was there to enjoy a good time, urging me not to spoil the fun, then instructing me to draw a triangle, point downward, on the pad of paper in front of me that I couldn't even see. Then draw a small rectangle that was taller than it was wide on the top, flat part of the triangle, then draw a star on the point at the bottom of the triangle. The audience was very impressed that I had drawn the magician's Christmas tree, only upside down. Right before the helmet came off, the recording urged me not to tell anyone how the trick was done. Story 75. I worked at a place that didn't like to give raises. In an effort to justify it, they would write people up for nonsense around review time and fill people's employee files with petty write-ups. I would go into work early and purge the files, removing anything negative. Story 76. My wife was a young mom. She still dated, but for years she protected Valentine's Day for her and her son. When she moved into our current house, the V-Day tradition became getting dinner at the local diner. One of the first years doing this, they went to pay and were told that someone had paid it forward because they thought it was cute seeing a mom and her kid out on Valentine's Day. They have done the same pay it forward every year since. These days, Her and I will often spend Valentine's Day together, but the three of us still go to that diner within a few days of V-Day and still pay forward the bill. Anyway, the secret I've kept is that the initial pay for her and her son was her dad. He knew about the tradition of going to the diner together and called the diner ahead of time with her name and gave his credit card info to cover it. He told me this in confidence, so I have kept the secret for him and always played dumb on Valentine's Day about how that cute tradition ever started. Story 77. Grade 3 in the 70s. Watched something the night before where burglars or spies broke into somewhere using plastic explosives on a lock. My grade 3 class had a supply of plasticine, modeling clay. I decided to blow the lock on the teacher's filing cabinet. I packed the clay on and in the lock, but the bell rang before I could set the charge. Probably pipe cleaner wires. This was Friday morning. It said over the weekend. Teacher was not happy on Monday morning, but no one copped to it. Story 78. My parents didn't want me to learn to ride a bike until I turned 8, but I really wanted to learn. So I snuck into the garage when they weren't paying attention, and the garage didn't have cars in it, and rode my sister's bike in circles and crashed into things until I figured it out. Then I would sneak out and ride around the neighborhood for 2 years, and no one had any idea I was gone. It was the 80s. Being a kid was different back then. Then, when I was 8, they bought me a bike for my birthday, and I was so excited. I forgot the secret, jumped on, and rode off expertly. Wow, Magic, you're really picking that up fast. I realized what I had done and pretended to fall off, and then had to relearn for them before I could go riding. Story 79. My son was really into digging holes when he was 6. Had a 3 feet deep one going in the yard because he was convinced. He was on top of some old ruins, kept bringing small old things into the house that he was so excited he discovered, and displayed them in his room after cleaning them. To this day, he doesn't know I'd been going to the flea market every Saturday and buying small bits of old-looking junk and planting them in the hole for him to find. Story 80. When I was about 10, I shoplifted. I wasn't a troubled kid in that way typically, never stole otherwise. But I was at an amusement park and they had those switchblade combs in the prize shop. Looks like a switchblade knife. But when you hit the button, a comb pops out instead. I'd always wanted one badly, and I had money and was fully willing to pay for it, but they wouldn't accept money. Only skee-ball tickets. So, knowing my middling skee-ball skills, I made a rash decision and just took the thing. I kind of figured, if they won't accept hard currency for this, it mustn't be worth much to them. Ergo, yoink. It's the only time I've shoplifted, and I had the thing for years. I still kind of think they're cool. Also, for those wondering, this was late 1980s, way before the internet and Amazon, where I could have just found one online easily. Back then, if you saw a rare item that you wanted, it might literally be the only time in your life you would encounter it. Had to seize the day, had to seize it, press the button, and comb my mullet like a badass. I regret nothing. Story 81. This just happened over the past few months. My wife's best friend since college has 2 beautiful kids and a deadbeat for an ex-husband. Her oldest was graduating high school this past spring, and while she makes enough to support herself and the kids, it's tight. Her ex contributes nothing or very little. Back to graduation. Ex was supposed to pay for the venue for the grad party. Shockingly, that didn't happen. So mom covered it, but then didn't know how she was going to cover catering. My wife and I stepped in and offered to cover catering, a custom cake, decorations, beverages, as well as setup and tear down. All the planning and reserving of things occurred February and March. In April, I got laid off from my job. We still covered everything, but the mom has no idea I lost my job. She would have fought tooth and nail to prevent us from paying for anything. She'll never know, and never have to worry about making sure her kid wasn't embarrassed because they couldn't afford a grad party when all of her friends could. We are taking mom and kids out for mom's birthday tonight and covering that as well. BTW, I did land a new gig and start in a week. Story 82. I hid my tooth under my pillow for the tooth fairy to find and give me money. I knew it was my dad giving me money. So after he slipped cash under my pillow and threw the tooth away, I sifted through the trash and showed it to him and said I lost another tooth. I got an extra 20 bucks. Story 83. I pretend to like every video game my nephew loves. He is so sweet, and he always asks me if I like X video games so I can play with him, and I always pretend I do so that we can play together. I don't give a fig about video games, but I love spending time with him. And also, it's fun to pretend to be a kid and get excited about games, but it's spending time with him that really makes me happy. Story 84. When I was 16, we were told that my grandpa, my mom's father, was in the hospital. We couldn't get a flight, and the only people that could leave immediately was my mom and I. My mom was too emotional to drive, so I drove her 11 hours to the hospital. I had just gotten a learner's permit. We got there at about 2 a.m., but he was already in a medically induced coma. At the time, we knew he was unlikely to come out of it, and my mom was really struggling with the fact that she wouldn't be able to talk to him one last time. But I stood in the hospital room as she tried her best to talk to him. After my mom and I left the hospital to find a hotel, and my mom broke down about him not being able to hear her or say anything back. I told her that when she said she loved him, his heart rate increased on the monitor, and that he may not have been able to say it back, but he knew she was there with him, and that he loves her too. I'm not sure if that's true or not. He never did come out of the coma. He passed 2 days later. But this was 10 years ago, and she still knows that he hurt her. I'll die with that secret for sure. Story 85. I was, in fact, too lazy to fill in and send the paperwork to sign up for university. I went to the introduction week knowing that, and pretended it got lost in the mail, and signed up on the spot. Yes, that is how I got into a top 100 university. There was plenty of space. I wouldn't recommend it, though. Story 86. My 6-year-old nephew comes over and helps me do Legos, do yard work, helps me bake and plant my garden. One spring, he helped me start my garden, but he left before we got to plant the carrots. I told him I would plant them later. BTW, he has a great memory. Well, fast forward to late summer, and he called and wanted to know if the carrots were ready to pick. I never planted them. I went to the market, bought some carrots, and put them all in the ground. He came over and helped me dig them out. He was so excited. My wife showed everybody. Facebook, friends, relatives. Grandfather said, "Wow, those are best-looking carrots I've ever seen. Mine never come out like those." I never told anyone my secret. Story 87. Every December 23rd, I leave an envelope with a few $100s on the windshield of the most beat-up car I can find in the Walmart parking lot and drive away. Never told a soul until right now. Story 88. I forgot about this until just now. I was at my GF's family's house when I was in college. Her high school-aged brother and I were sitting on the couch watching TV. My stomach was killing me, and I got up to go to the bathroom. I had been constipated for 3 days, and when I tell you I cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war, I'm telling you it was a major deposit. Well, and to this day I cannot tell you why, but at 20 years old, I completely forgot to flush it. It was like I pooped out some brain cells. I went back and sat next to GF's 14 years old brother and watched TV. Suddenly, I hear my, easily grossed out, GF shriek like a freaking banshee from the bathroom and scream her brother's name in disgust. I realized instantly what had happened and was terrified as we had just started going out, and she was a bit formal, uptight, about things like bodily functions. He looked at me and asked, "What's she screaming about?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Buddy, just say I'm sorry," really loud for me. He did so, the toilet flushed, and it was never discussed. That was 32 years ago. Story 89. The funniest one that came out years later, not forever, but so funny, was my now girlfriend. When she had first come to live with me, she was so anxious about everything without a reason. It must have been the first month that we were living together. I had bought a very juicy sandwich for me to eat the next morning. I fell asleep, and she was up till late. She got so hungry that ate the sandwich at some point during the night. And she got so anxious about it that she told me the next day that she looked at it, and it had for some reason gone moldy, so she threw it in the trash. She kept that for years, a secret, thinking that I'd be outraged knowing that she ate my sandwich. She told me years later. Every time we remember this, we always laugh about it. For context, I am the calmest person ever. She was just coming from an abusive household and acted like that, because she wasn't allowed to touch food by her mother's rules if her mother hadn't said so. Now that she knows I'm calm and I don't react badly to things like that, she eats all my food, you guys. Story 90. In elementary school, due to limited gymnasium space, our basketball team had to practice in the early morning before school. I must not have heard our coach when he told us that practice would be canceled the next day because of a personal scheduling conflict. One other kid and I showed up to find an empty gym with all the lights out. We spent the hour using a turned-over garbage can and the increasing sunlight from the skylights to try to dunk a kid's mini basketball on the 10-foot rim. I was tall for my age, but still couldn't do it. We never told anyone.